up and down the country preaching doom and gloom. In fact, he went around the world preaching doom and gloom, saying that New Zealand was wet, whiny and miserable, and that Kiwi businesses had gone soft and we were in recession, when we never were. Mr. Speaker, not only did we do all of those things, but whilst we were doing those things, we ensured that we were investing record amounts in fixing up New Zealand's run-down infrastructure. We also made sure that health and education was being properly funded, something that we could not say when we became the government in 2017. But, Mr. Speaker, I also want to make the second of the pledges that I want to make in this House today, that as an opposition and as a future government, we will seek to bring New Zealanders together, not drive a wedge between Kiwis. The three most egregious examples of that we see from the incoming government are this. First, the adoption of COVID-19 conspiracy theories as apparent government policy. I say to the members opposite who have pledged to end all COVID-19 mandates, can they name one that's still in place? Can they name one? I hear crickets on the Treasury benches, Mr. Speaker, because there aren't any. But they want to buy into the conspiracy theorist view. They are now questioning the efficacy of vaccine science. Mr. Speaker, I think this House should be proud of the fact that we, as a whole Parliament, said to New Zealanders that vaccines were safe and effective, and Kiwis should do that. And I think it is a massive step backwards that this government are now officially questioning that. I also think, Mr. Speaker, that it's a stain on New Zealand's international reputation that we are one of only 2 or 3 countries in the world saying that we don't want to be part of the system that the World Health Organization are setting up to stop future pandemics. A system set up to stop future pandemics, and this government are saying they don't want New Zealand to be part of it, making us an embarrassing international outlier. We see outright attacks from the incoming government on our gender diverse community that are frankly a massive step backwards. I want our schools to be a safe place for all young New Zealanders, including our gender diverse young people. I want all of our young people in New Zealand to be free to be who they are, to not feel like they have to be someone who they are not when they walk through the school gate. And I want New Zealand to be a country where young people learn to be respectful of diversity and difference, not one where they are encouraged to judge and persecute others who are not like them. But Mr. Speaker, perhaps the most egregious and divisive policies that we are seeing from this government are when it comes to issues around Māori. During my lifetime, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the fact that New Zealand, under successive governments, blue and red, has made enormous progress towards righting some of the wrongs of the past, towards bringing New Zealand together, towards celebrating Māori culture and identity in ways that we haven't in the past. And I am very disappointed that based on what we're seeing in the coalition documents of this government, this could be the first government in a generation to go backwards on those issues. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders have nothing to fear from Māori thriving in New Zealand. When Māori thrive, all New Zealanders will thrive. I believe that Te Reo Māori is a taonga for New Zealand. We should be proud of it. We should celebrate it. We should foster it. And we should encourage New Zealanders to take it up in greater numbers. The rhetoric that we've seen in the last 24 hours of suggesting that those who speak fluent Te Reo Māori in public service roles should have their pay docked is simply disgraceful. We pay extra allowances to teachers who are fluent in Te Reo Māori because there is so much demand for it, because so many young New Zealanders want to learn it. And I am proud as Minister of Education to have seen an expansion of Te Reo Māori provision in our schools so that the future generations of New Zealanders, including Pākehā New Zealanders, can learn Te Reo Māori, something I didn't get the opportunity to do when I was at school and I wish that I had. Yes. And I want to make sure that future New Zealanders get to have that. I say to members opposite that non-Māori New Zealanders have nothing to fear from a Māori health authority focused on improving the health outcomes for Māori New Zealanders. And we have nothing to fear from a by Māori for Māori approach. Mr. Speaker, this government, in their speech from the throne and in their coalition agreement, set out all of the areas where they want to take New Zealand backwards, very few where they want to take New Zealand forwards. Repealing the Resource Management Act, which the last national government said was flawed and needed to be changed, and putting it back to what it was before, so repealing the repeal and going back to the RMA isn't going to take New Zealand forward, particularly when they don't know what they're going to eventually replace it with. Dialing back workers' rights isn't going to take New Zealand forward. Removing fair pay agreements that had the potential to lift salary and wages for some of the lowest paid New Zealand workers isn't going to take New Zealand forward. Reinstating 90-day fire-at-will trials isn't going to improve the lot of working New Zealanders. And watering down contractors' rights will simply return us to the race to the bottom. I think one of the big challenges our economy faces in recent decades is that we've seen a decoupling of effort and reward. We actually have to make sure work pays. And this government wants to turn back the clock on all of the things that have seen rising incomes for working New Zealanders. Mr. Speaker, another area where the government want to take us backwards, tragically for New Zealand today, but even more tragically for New Zealand tomorrow, is in the area of climate change. This government inherit a climate emissions reduction profile that is trending down for the first time in New Zealand's history and has been for the last 3 years. And yet, what they want to do is remove the three things that have actually contributed to that reduction. They want to abolish the Climate Emergency Response Fund. They want to abolish the government investment in decarbonising industry. They want to abolish the clean car rebate, all examples of things that will take New Zealand backwards, that will turn back the clock on our effort to combat climate change, and they have nothing to replace those things with. It's all hollow rhetoric, greenwashing, if you wanted to call it that, which is actually going to see New Zealand's climate profile getting worse again. Right. And given that that was the cost of living election, Mr. Speaker, I looked closely in the speech from the throne and the coalition deals to see what they were actually going to do about it. And there's very little in there that's actually going to help New Zealanders to tackle the rising cost of living, particularly given the things that are in there are likely to keep inflation and interest rates higher for longer. Mr. Speaker, they're off to a shambolic start, but sadly, there is a lot more to come. I am looking forward, for example, to seeing New Zealand First's response when the ACT Party brings the legislation to the House that they have promised and that New Zealand First have pledged to support, to repeal changes to the Overseas Investment Act that the last coalition government introduced at the behest of New Zealand First to introduce the national interest test into the Overseas Investment Act. I know New Zealand First, I'm not sure they were fully awake at that part of the discussions where they literally signed up to that and said that they were going to vote in favour of repealing the provisions in the Overseas Investment Act that they want to put in place in the first place. Mere detail, Shane Jones says. I think we'll hear a bit of that in the next little while, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to hearing what New Zealand First has to say about rail investment, given that the incoming national government have made very little provision for any increased investment in rail. And I know that that's something that matters a lot to them. Although I did notice Nicola Willis railing against the increase in the cost of of replacing the inter-island ferries. Fortunately for her, she could speak to the minister who initiated the replacement of the inter-island ferries. He's sitting 2 seats down, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, who kicked off the procurement process for the replacement of the inter-island rail ferries. Of course, We know that the New Zealand First Party say they want to increase the minimum wage, while the ACT Party say they want to have it frozen. So I'm sure that's going to be an interesting debate around the Cabinet table. It'll be very interesting to see where they land on forestry conversions, Mr Speaker, given New Zealand First seem to want more of it for forestry and ACT and National seem to want less of it. I'm looking forward to seeing them progressing their legislation on the Kermadex after 6 years of complaining about the lack of progress on that under the last government. Don't give in so early, Shane. Mr Speaker. Although there'll be a few people saying haere when New Zealand First vote in favour of bringing back 90-day trials, something they voted in favour of removing in the first place, and actually some tenants saying haere when they bring back no-clause evictions for tenants, something again New Zealand First previously voted to abolish. And New Zealand First, of course, have also signed up to reintroduce charter schools, something they spent 9 years in opposition being vehemently opposed to. Mr Speaker, ultimately it is a government that wants to take New Zealand back. But I do want to, given this is my first contribution in this House, take a moment to say thank you, because whilst this marks the beginning of the new government, it does also mark the end of the last government. And I want to take a moment to thank New Zealanders for their support over the last 6 years through some extraordinary challenging circumstances, to thank all of those staff who worked for us in the beehive, who now find themselves seeking other employment, one of the perhaps more brutal parts of this democratic process. I do want to take a moment to say thank you to all of them for their contributions. And I do want to take a moment to reflect on what they helped us to achieve in that 6 years that we were in government, because it does very much set the context for what this government is inheriting. More New Zealanders in work than ever before. We have the highest rate of Kiwis in jobs with a 69.8% employment rate, having created 281,000 new jobs during our time in government. Mr Speaker, I'm proud of the work that we did to close the gender pay gap, and I hope, all politics aside, that is work that will continue under the incoming government, because it is simply wrong that for generations, women have been paid less than men for doing work of the same value. We have made significant progress in closing the gender pay gap and resolving historic pay equity claims. I hope that work will continue, because I believe that it must. Mr Speaker, we extended free doctor's visits to 14-year-olds. We extended paid parental leave to 26 weeks. We significantly increased health funding, including to Pharmac, and we abolished prescription charges that resulted in 3 million free prescriptions for New Zealanders, something that I believe stopped New Zealanders ending up in our emergency departments with avoidable illnesses because they weren't getting the medication that they needed. We significantly increased the pay for our public sector workers like nurses, like doctors, like teachers, like police, like firefighters. We introduced new options for mental health support, including 1 million free access and choice mental health sessions, and I hope that the momentum on those things will continue. I hope that the momentum that we had in rebuilding our apprenticeship scheme continues, Mr Speaker. 274,000 New Zealanders benefiting from free apprenticeships and targeted trades training. I hope the work that we started to rebuild our schools and hospitals will continue. 2,200 more classrooms, 3,800 more teachers, mana and mahi and programs like that helping to get young New Zealanders into work and into education and training. 1 million free and healthy school lunches, 77,000 fewer children living in poverty. That's right. Emissions in New Zealand falling for 3 years in a row, record levels of renewable electricity generation, 110,000 low-income Kiwi households getting cheaper power bills because of the Warmer Kiwi Homes scheme. A 70% increase in the number of electric vehicles on our roads. When we became government in 2017, just 2% of the cars coming into the market were electric or hybrid vehicles, and as we leave office, that is 37%, a huge improvement. We've been replacing coal boilers across the country with renewable energy sources. I want to highlight the key work of David Parker and Damien O'Connor, our trade ministers, two of the most successful trade ministers in New Zealand's history. When we became government, less than half our exports were covered by free trade agreements. Now nearly 3/4 are. The work that we have done in public housing deserves particular mention. 13,000 new public homes under our government since 2017. The work that we did to put extra police on the beat, 1,800 extra police on the beat under our government. 1,800 extra police on the beat under our government. Firearms reform, including the introduction of the firearms registry, something that the New Zealand Police have asked for a long time. Record investments in transport, including fixing a record number of potholes over the last year. Completing legacy infrastructure projects like Transmission Gully that were left in a heck of a mess by the outgoing national government, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that I'm very proud of our track record in delivering for Māori and delivering for Pacific New Zealanders. And on that last note, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that Pacific New Zealanders are a growing and significant part of the New Zealand economy, a growing and significant part of New Zealand society, and I think it's telling that the incoming government didn't mention them once in the speech from the throne today. Not one single time, Mr. Speaker. That does not bode well for Pacific New Zealanders in the future. So, Mr. Speaker, we leave government proud of our track record, committed to holding the incoming government to account, concerned about the direction that they are taking New Zealand in, which is backwards on all of the important measures that should be important to New Zealand's future, and absolutely resolved, Mr. Speaker, that for the first time in New Zealand's history, this will be a one-term national government.
The question is that the amendment be agreed to. I call on the Right Honourable Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is great to be back. Not just back, but back with a bigger team, more talent, fresh ideas, committed coalition partners, and a big program to deliver and a big mandate from voters to get New Zealand back on track. And I want to say, speaking of more talent in National, before I go further, can I say thank you to both James and Katie for those outstanding and inspiring maiden speeches. James, I am moved to know that both your parents were watching here in this space today. And having met both of them, I can only imagine their pride. And you are the embodiment of the belief on this side of the House that education can change lives. And I want to acknowledge your mother's foresight, as you do too, because in instilling the value of education in you, she gave you a gift. And you stepped up and you made the most of it and you worked hard as a result. You are here today because of it, and I know you're going to make great contributions to this place, so congratulations, James, well done. Katie, you were also instrumental in helping National win back the Bay, and we can all see why. Like James, you too have been strongly shaped by your family's circumstances, and in your case, through business, service, and a love of the place that you call home. And I also want to acknowledge your family on what is a proud day for them too, and for you and for National. So congratulations, Katie, as well. And Mr. Speaker, James and Katie's paths to this House have been very different, but their values, I believe, are very similar. They are National Party values that cherish independence, that cherish aspiration and effort, and that call to public service. And it is for all 123 of us MPs an honour and a privilege to serve the public from this very place, which is the beating heart of New Zealand's democracy. And we represent different parties and we come from different backgrounds and experiences with unique life stories. But in this House, each of us is heard. Our voices count. And across the House, I genuinely want to congratulate every new MP on your election to Parliament and urge you to use your time here well. And congratulations again to you, Mr. Speaker. Your guidance, experience and sense of fairness will serve all of us in this House and New Zealand very well. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have to say, New Zealand is under new management. And we are here because people believe that we are the parties that can get things done. That's why you elect parties on this side of the House. And just like there are laws of nature and just like there are laws of physics, there are laws of politics. Because if you want lower tax, you vote for us. If you want the government books managed well, you vote for us. And if you want to create more opportunities for everyone, you vote for us. And New Zealanders get it, and New Zealanders want it, and that's why they elected the parties in this coalition government. They know that we will get things done and that those things will be the things that matter to them. New Zealanders want National Act and New Zealand First to be the strong government that New Zealand needs. They want us to deliver you, and I'm telling you, we will. So let me take a moment just to acknowledge the national team in this House. And you've already met two of our class of 23. But from Grant McCullum in Northland to Miles Anderson down south in Waitaki, from Dana Kirkpatrick in the East Coast to Maureen Pugh on the West Coast, national MPs reclaimed from Labour so much of New Zealand in this year's election. And I welcome two national MPs who are here for a second turn, Northcote MP Dan Bidwar and Paolo Garcia. And didn't Paolo Garcia do well, turning Newland blue for the first time in 60 years? 60 years. It is great to have you both back. Great to have you both back. And we also welcome Nancy Liu off the list after a happy byproduct of Andrew Bailey smashing the Port Waikato by-election. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the North Island, our new MPs are Carl Bates in Wanganui, Cameron Brewer in Upper Harbour, Mike Butterick in Wairarapa, Carlos Chung from Mount Roskill, and Mount Roskill, what a win that was as well. We've got Tim Costley in Otaki, we've got Greg Fleming from Mongakeke, we've got Ryan Hamilton aptly in Hamilton East, we've got David McLeod in New Plymouth, Rima Narkley from Takanini, Suze Redmayne from Rangateke, Tom Rutherford from the Bay of Plenty, and Catherine Wedd from Tukituki, who you heard Katie talk to in her remarks. And in the South Island, where we already have a strong showing of MPs, we're adding Hamish Campbell in Ireland, and we're adding Vanessa Wienick in Banks Palincha, and what a great win that was too. And on top, there are all the returning MPs, some now with seats that they've won back. And I want to say congratulations to you all. It was an excellent election for National. But the pledge of the coalition government is that whether you voted for us or not, we will govern for you. And I do also want to take this opportunity to welcome back to Parliament the expanded ACT and also New Zealand First teams. Thank you for sharing National's commitment to doing the practical, the important things that will make this a better country for all New Zealanders, to growing the economy, to governing with common sense and to making people's lives easier. We are the parties with different priorities and different concerns, but there is a strong alignment on our core values, like believing in the dignity of independence, and that if you work hard in the best country on planet Earth, you should be able to get ahead. And I have to say, I am looking forward to working together with our three teams, putting New Zealand's interests first as we deliver our shared policy program. Now, on this side of the House, we all came to politics to make a positive change for the country that we love, we are proud of, and that we see so much potential in. And we are going to manage the economy well. Now that we've rescued it from Labour, we'll nurse it back to health. We will ease the cost of living. In fact, we've already started. We will restore law and order. The coalition parties separately and together as a government are absolutely committed to offenders facing real consequences for their crimes and are committed to New Zealanders feeling safe in their homes, in their businesses and in their communities. We are going to get public services working better, because when you care about people, and we care deeply about people, you don't just wring your hands and look anguish and spout rhetoric. Looking anguish doesn't take an hour off an emergency wait list in an emergency department. You need to actually get stuck in, sort it out, and actually get things done to make the difference. We are about attitudes on this side of the House, not platitudes. It's our attitude to public money is to respect the people who actually earn it. And we're going to do that by letting the people who earn it keep more of it. Because that part of that they hand over in tax, we will spend on helping New Zealanders get ahead and on making this great country even better. And with better education, more support for the stretched health workforce, better and faster roads, less red tape, more renewable energy and more initiatives to increase New Zealand's prosperity so that we can all get ahead. We're about increasing incomes and outcomes. And I have to say I've had many impressive briefings already with very good senior public servants in the past few days. And when they come in with their good ideas for actually achieving what the government wants, I say to them, that's great, but how do we do it faster? Because good execution matters, and that's measured by results and it's measured by outcomes. But Mr. Speaker, the first result I actually want to talk about is the election result, and specifically Labor's. Because the swearing in yesterday was my very first day in the House on the government's benches, and the view from here is actually still of Labor, but now there's just a lot fewer of them. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, what we just now heard from Chris Hipkins was not righteous indignation. Yeah, it was not righteous indignation. It was not righteous indignation, it was ritual humiliation. Because I got to say, Chris Hipkins started the last term with 65 MPs, and he's starting this one with 34. Think about it, Chris Hipkins started the last term with the biggest majority in MMP history in New Zealand, and is starting this one with one of the most humiliating defeats for the Labor Party. And I have to say, Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson, they started this last term with everything that they needed, They started the last term with everything they needed to actually set up a political dynasty for a decade, and they squandered it. No reason they should have been in power for 10 or 12 years. They didn't make it. They squandered the opportunity that they've got. And I recall when he lost Meka Whaitiri and he said he didn't know where she'd gone. Well, he's lost around 30 MPs. He's lost 30 MPs. But he knows where they are. He knows where those 30 MPs are. They're out looking for jobs. And I have to say, they're not bad people, but they served in a very bad government. And New Zealanders saw it, and New Zealanders paid for it, and New Zealanders kicked them out. And make no mistake, Labor earned its loss. It worked hard for it. Labor wasted time. They squandered public money, and they made this great country and its people miss out on opportunities. MPs on that side of the House put Labor ideology and dogma ahead of New Zealand's interests, and New Zealand punished them for it. And let it be a reminder to all of us in this House that we are actually here to represent the people and their needs. That's what we're here to do. So I have to say, Labor is sitting over there wondering who to blame for them going from 65 MPs, the most ever in the history of MMP in this country, to the 32 uncomfortable people over there with survivor's guilt that I see opposite me. You've got 2 new MPs, and I say congratulations. But we heard from a bitter and a twisted and a negative Chris Hipkins, the one we saw during the campaign over there. But you can see he's sitting over there asking the question, how has he survived when nearly half of his caucus lost their jobs under his leadership? Why is he still here when so little was achieved and so little was delivered? Why is he still here? Why is he still here after squandering and decimating an absolute majority in just 3 years? Squandering an absolute majority in 3 years. And so many Kiwis said, I'll vote for anyone but Labor, and they did. And I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about Chris Hipkins a little bit. And I just have to say, he is actually like an arsonist who, having thrown an accelerant all over the joint and lit the place up, he doesn't just slink off, actually leaving the scene, realising he's caused a huge amount of damage. He doesn't actually fess up, put his hand up, apologise to the New Zealand people and actually say he got it wrong. He just simply loiters and hangs around at the scene of the crime, actually just waiting and watching everything. And meanwhile, the good news I've got to tell you is the fire brigade is showing up and we're going to deal with it. That's what's going to happen. But you have to ask the question, why is he here? And then Grant Robertson, he's also got survivor's guilt, and he's sitting there saying, why me? Why did I survive when I was the Minister of Finance who delivered food price inflation of 28%? 28%, faster than at any time since the 1980s. Why did I survive when weekly rents went up $180 per week? Why? Why is he still here? When the official cash rate hit its highest point since 2008. You tripled mortgage interest rates, you crippled family budgets, and the question Grant Robertson got asked is, why am I still here? Why? Why is he still here after spending more, borrowing more, taxing more, and delivering worse outcomes? He's got nothing to show for it. And so we're asking the same question. Why, having done such a terrible job, is he still here? Ginny Anderson probably isn't asking herself why she survived, because self-reflection may not actually be her thing. But she should be asking, why is she still here? Because crime got a lot worse on her watch and Kiwis feel a lot less safe on the streets and in their own neighbourhoods. Aisha Viral, she should also have survivor's guilt because we know so many health outcomes went backwards under Labor. Immunisation rates, wait list times at emergency departments, first specialist appointments, surgeries, all went backwards over that time. So let me just, in the spirit of being supportive, help Labor with where they went wrong, because we heard a diatribe from Chris Hipkins and some revisionist history going on, but let me just give you some help. While Labor was wasting billions of dollars and achieving nothing, while they were distracted building a big new health bureaucracy as health outcomes went backwards, while they were alienating the public by progressing co-governance without ever explaining it, and while they were talking gibberish in the draft science curriculum, which didn't even mention the words physics, chemistry or biology, New Zealanders were actually struggling. And families were facing rising bills, they were going backwards, and Labor was busy on new taxes and hate speech. And I point this out merely to help Labor work out what went wrong, and also to say that on this side of the House, we understand what matters to New Zealanders. The things that impact their daily lives are the things that matter the most to all of them. Those are the things that we need to be talking about in this place. Those are the things that the public elected us to talk about here. Those are the things that matter the most to them. And along with the billions of dollars of wasted public money, there was the cabinet chaos, the underperformance everywhere, and New Zealanders' fear, genuine fear, that they could lose their homes. And don't tell me it wasn't so, because I spoke to those people on the election campaign. And I listened to them, and I literally held the hands of some of them, like that small business owner who was trying so hard, but her business was going under, and she hadn't told her team yet because those families depended on those incomes. And she cried telling me how hard it was, and that's how it was to be a small business owner after 6 years of Labor. And I met people who own dairies where terrible things had happened to them, and I truly hope that the children in those families recover from those experiences. And I met farmers who used to spend a couple of hours a week on paperwork, and they were dedicated to running their properties in the most environmentally sustainable way they could. And now they spend a day a week complying with the government bureaucracy and the rules, telling them how to do their jobs. And this government's going to show a lot more respect than the last government did to those people. And so, Mr. Speaker, I have to say there is hope. There is a government that appreciates that businesses provide jobs and opportunities for other New Zealanders. Business owners and managers understand that their greatest resource is their team. And it is by working together that the team grows the business and it creates better wages and more opportunities and more jobs. And that's the national way of looking at it. It's the aspirational way. And we say it takes a lot of courage to start a small business and to employ people, and those who do it well should be extremely proud of what they do. And it's similar with private rentals. Over here, we know that landlords are mostly New Zealanders who are trying hard to get ahead by investing their savings and providing homes for other families. And here's what Labor has never understood. Many of the tenants that they see as perpetual victims of the so-called evil capitalist landlords have aspirations too. They have aspirations too. Not only to own their own homes, but perhaps one day maybe to become landlords themselves. So they voted for us as a government of aspiration. And we are a government that says this will once again be a country where you can realistically go about achieving your dream. Your path might be trades training, it might be tertiary education, a business you started at the dining room table or on a fishing boat, or just a really good idea to solve something that bugs you. But whatever the motivation and whoever and wherever you are, we want to encourage people to have a go in this country. We will not be a government that slams people with rules and costs and that makes even the most hopeful entrepreneur lose hope as they have been doing. And national campaigns on 3 key areas that concerned us before the election, and I'm telling you, we're going to continue to drive improvement in government, and I want to thank ACT and New Zealand First for their support in doing that. The first thing is we're going to rebuild the economy to make it work for all New Zealanders. Because we know on this side of the House, we know that the living standards of every single one of us depends on a strong and growing economy. A strong and growing economy provides individuals and families with the opportunity to get ahead, and it generates the value and the wealth that lets us invest in this country and infrastructure and the public services that we so well deserve. And on the other hand, when the economy stagnates, as it has for the last 6 years, things become harder for more of us. And that's what we've been left with by Labor, an economy in a mess where high inflation has wreaked havoc on people's budgets, where the price of food, housing and groceries has risen faster than wages, meaning so many Kiwis have been going backwards, where interest rates have had to climb to eye-watering levels to try and put the lid back on inflation. But inflation has become so entrenched and embedded from 6 years of reckless, wasteful government spending that the Reserve Bank is already foreshadowing rates will have to stay higher for months to come. And that is Labor's legacy, and it's felt most keenly by anyone with a large mortgage, which they had to take on after the record increase in house prices under Labor. And it's a legacy felt by families and workers who are struggling to make their paycheck stretch for another 2 weeks. And it's for those people that we promise to work. It's for those people that we will be better than our predecessors. We will stop the wasteful government spending and get the books back in order, because we know that every dollar the government spends had to actually be earned by someone going to work and working hard. And that's why Simeon Brown has already instructed officials to stop work on the ridiculous $16 billion Lake Onslow pumped hydro scheme. When we've said we're going to stop doing things that are stupid and wasteful, we mean it. There's more of that coming, because people who are working out there in the rain, or people who are cleaning our offices here late at night and paying their taxes, expect us to treat that money carefully, just like they would themselves, and you didn't do it. We're going to let them keep more of their own money to encourage and reward hard work and to help ease the cost of living so that life gets a little bit easier for workers and families. And let's be clear, Labor should have adjusted tax rates a long time ago. That would have actually been the fair thing to do, but they had such an insatiable appetite and an addiction to spending. They wanted more and more of the public's money, and they took it off people who deserve to be paying less tax, not more. We're going to cut red tape, because we actually want to make life easier, especially for small businesses and especially for farmers, but also and we're going to cut that red tape so that that cost stops getting passed on to consumers with higher prices. And in some sectors, getting things done is more expensive in New Zealand than it is anywhere else in the world. And yes, we want to be world leading, but not for the cost of doing business. We're not a wealthy country, so we need to stop making things even more expensive by loading up unnecessary costs. And that means we're going to simplify planning rules so people who want to build stuff and get things done, from a new deck or to an offshore wind farm, can actually get on and get it done. We're going to get going on infrastructure, including 13 new roads of national significance and public transport projects that actually get progressed, not just talked and talked and talked about by consultants. We're going to unleash significant investment in new renewable energy generation so we can meet our climate targets without shutting down our most important economic sectors. And given the scale of the infrastructure deficit New Zealand faces after 6 years of a Labor government, we're going to be unapologetic about getting the private sector involved where that makes sense too. We know there's a lot of money sitting around with institutional investors both here in New Zealand and overseas, investors who are looking for safe, stable, long-term projects to invest in. So one of the first jobs of our new National Infrastructure Agency is going to be to set up a better matching of investors with projects to get things done faster. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn to law and order, because ensuring people are actually safe in their own homes, their businesses and communities is a pretty basic responsibility of any government. But the Labor government didn't live up to that responsibility, and over the past 6 years, violent crime went up 33%, serious assaults went up, I think, doubled, gang membership went up over 70%. And I've got to tell you, gangs wreck lives, and they are responsible for enormous social and community harm. And under Labor, they were allowed to overrun entire towns, take over motorways, and actually beat people up in public daylight. And that growth in gangs is troubling, especially for communities with a large gang presence, but also troubling for anyone who truly cares about our country. And as I've said before, if you care, you do something about it to help. So this government is going to focus on law and order and restoring personal responsibility as part of our commitment of making our communities safer. And of course, we'll focus on the causes of crime too, but also on law and order, because here's another stat for you. 60% of gang members, 60% more gang members are on home detention under Labor, and they're responsible for 1/3 of the breaches. And here's another one. Retail crime has impacted and been impacted by an incredible 92%. It's cost us actually $2.6 billion extra. And we're all now paying for that crime with higher prices and more inflation. We are going to combat youth offending. We're going to make sure we get our young offender military academies in place. We're going to make sure we actually put young people's lives on a better and a much more productive path going forward. And I tell you, our parties here on this side of the House are all aligned in amending the Sentencing Act so that we make sure you get appropriate consequences and you actually get serious time when you actually cause pain and suffering for people across New Zealand. We're going to restore the 3 strikes, and we're committed to training no fewer than 500 new frontline police officers in our first 2 years. Now, Labor said the 2017 election was going to be a new beginning for our education system. Remember that? Remember that one? That was what they said. You know, transformational government, going to be fantastic, going to deliver outstanding outcomes for education. They were right, but not in a good way, because essentially it was a new beginning for our education system, and a sad one. What we've seen is a rapid slide in academic achievement and the beginning of an enormous problem with absenteeism. And around 40% of our kids are not attending school regularly. I mean, that is startling and shameful, absolutely shameful. And just last night, we had the shocking and more sad news, not surprising, that actually in the PISA test, which is how countries are benchmarked against each other, in reading, maths and science, New Zealand has slid even further. And in all 3 of those subject areas, our results are the worst that they've ever been. And that is Labor's legacy in education, and that is Chris Hipkins' legacy as Education Minister for 5.5 years. All talk, all rhetoric, lots of hiring of bureaucrats, no delivery, no outcomes. And I am determined we are going to turn it around, because every pupil, whether they're Māori, non-Māori, urban, rural, whoever they are, wherever they hope for, needs for the education system to do better by them. And Mr. Speaker, our results in health have also declined. There is just so much for us to do, and we're up for it. We are going to boost the health workforce, encourage nurses and midwives to stay, train more doctors. We're going to focus on results, and because results matter, they save lives. Mr. Speaker, we are delighted to be back with a big team. We are delighted to be back with a big program and big ambitions for New Zealand at home and overseas. New Zealand has everything it needs to be successful, and now with a government committed to making it happen. And New Zealanders can be positive about the future. And change won't be easy, and it won't be quick, because Labor has left us a lot to repair and to rebuild, and the books are not in good shape. But I tell you, there's nothing that can't be done by a government that actually knows what it's doing. There's nothing that can't be done when we don't put New Zealanders first. That's what this is about. This government's going to do. That's what we're going to do. It's what we came here to do. Our team is in place. Our partners are ready. The people have given us the mandate, and we are ready to go to work. Thank you very much.